Welcome to this live Bridging the Gap podcasting episode. Super excited to be coming live during I2B. So we're going to run this like a normal podcast, except we have an audience, which I'm super excited about. So as we go along, if you have any questions that you want us to pull into the conversation, feel free to do that in the chat. I have it open. I'm going to be looking at those and I'll pull them in. So as I normally say on the podcast, hello, innovators. For those who don't know me, I'm Todd Wyant, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast. It's presented by Applied Software and GRAITEC Group. You're invited to join our conversation today to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. I'm super excited to be joined today by Amy Powell. She's the founder of WellWorks, bringing nearly 2 decades of construction experience, primarily as a project manager for a commercial GC, and recognizing the gap in training tailored to the unique challenges faced in construction. Amy decided to roll up her sleeves and do something about it, going back to school to earn her master's in adult education and crafted a specialized leadership program for field leaders. This program equips industry professionals to excel in their roles now and in the future to lead their diverse teams effectively. Super excited to welcome Amy back to the podcast. Welcome back, Amy.
Thank you. I'm really excited for this conversation. Thanks for inviting me back.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who don't know and didn't catch the first episode where you came on a few months back, which I encourage everybody to go back and listen to. It's a great episode. How'd you get into the construction industry to begin with?
Well, say probably in the non-traditional route in this sense, in that I actually went to college for it. I didn't have any family at all in construction, any experience in it before my butt hit the seat in a college classroom. I had no idea what I was getting into. It was when an advisor said construction management was an option for a degree. It was one of those instant, yes, I don't know what that is, but tell me more. And so I actually got in through that way, got introduced, but I did realize that a lot of my classmates had a lot of those experiences working summers with their dads or their families, in construction. So I felt I had to probably double down and catch up and try to absorb as much as possible to try to catch up to what they knew and their experiences in construction. So ever since then, I've just immersed myself in construction in almost any way, right? The public sector, community service, working on my spring break and my Christmas break and summer breaks, right? And just trying to gain those experiences. But that's really how I got introduced to construction, was through college, of all things.
Yeah. I like it. So let's kind of dive into some of the unique needs happening here in construction, as there's a lot of change happening in this industry, especially over the last 3 or 4 years. But considering the unique needs happening in this industry, what are some of the essential elements that a training program really should include to be truly effective?
I think it needs to include a lot of different things, right? And to create like a quality training programs, I'd like to clarify quality, because this can mean so many different things to different people, right? Quality to me is maximizing the learning transfer. And when I transitioned from project management to trainer, I thought I was nailing it. I thought I was giving all these fantastic trainings. Turns out I really sucked at it. I was a project manager by trade, not a trainer, right? That's why I went back and got my master's in it. And learning transfer isn't necessarily how energized or motivated the participants are when they leave the training, similar to how we may feel after, a sports event or a keynote speaker, right? They could just build that. But or how much they memorized, right? And can regurgitate, like, honestly, I did in college, right? In some of those classes in college. But to make it to where it's an effective and quality program, it has to maximize learning transfer, which is the ability of the participant to successfully apply the behavior, the knowledge, or the skills acquired in the learning event, right? So that's a little bit different than just memorizing it or attaching to it or feeling energized, like after drinking a Monster drink or a coffee after it, right? Being able to apply it and over time and correctly in that long term, that's what we're trying to maximize in these learning events.
Mm-hmm. I think that's That's huge. Cause you said it's not about necessarily how hyped somebody is after the training event. Uh, that sounds, when you say that, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. But I think my default would have been the more excited you are afterwards, the more likely you are to have learned something. So it's a really interesting kind of perspective to put in place there.
Yeah, well, those aren't always separated, right? I mean, you want excitement and you want engagement within that training program, but you can feel excited after something. And I'm sure everybody's experienced this, right? You go to something and you're like, man, I'm motivated. I learned all these time management skills. They were fantastic, right? And then how long does that last, right? What was it, that learning experience, or was it really kind of just coming off of that? Oh, well, now I need to go back for more.
Yeah.
I need some more energy here. I'm trying to get some more there. So they're good. It's not saying that that's bad. It's a fantastic thing, and there's a place for that. But it's just a little different of what are you trying to get from that? The learning transfer, again, is for them to apply the behavior, the knowledge, and those skills correctly and in the way that they need it most, or the trainer needs it most. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me think of the mountaintop experience of like a conference, when you have just pages and pages of takeaway notes of like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to change this habit. I'm going to do this and this and this. And then you get back in and you're like, maybe looked at that, 5 pages of notes once. And maybe there's one thing that I pulled out afterwards because I've come back and I'm on to something else and my normal kind of day-to-day job takes over and I totally forget what I was super excited about.
Oh yeah, right. No, it is. And there's, and what's interesting from the trainer's perspective, right? Or 2 critical components to this, Todd, is for learning transfer is 1, as adults, we actually best learn by attaching a concept to something we have already learned or know as adults. So somebody put it, I should have found that quote of what it was, but it's more like new branches on a tree for adult learning versus building or growing an entirely new tree in your brain. Mm-hmm. So when we can attach to it, so if you're attached to that speaker, that content, I really want this, or you've got the background, you're able to resonate with that. Building on that experience is really important, but that's a big piece of that learning transfer, right? The more we know, right, or the more we can encourage them to connect this new concept or information to the training, to something they already do, or the more likely they are to retain and apply that new behavior. So if you are somebody going into a conference, right, go in with what your expectations are from that presentation. Again, it's fun to just absorb the energy and then, right, and take that energy and keep moving forward. But what do you need out of that? You're going to be more likely to kind of really identify that of just, where am I at? What do they have? And then how can I build off of what I already know? Yeah.
Interesting. So we've identified the learning transfer as an area to look at, a challenge to overcome in training. Are there other categories that are unique to construction that we face in implementing effective training programs? And then how can we overcome these?
There are. I don't like to overgeneralize, but knowing and working in this industry and just being it myself, I didn't honestly thrive in school. I guess I would have been considered a non-traditional learner, right? I'm an active learner. I like to do things. I like to experience them. I like to try them. I'm having this challenge right now and trying to learn a very complicated game, and I can't learn it just reading the instructions. I need to play it. I need to see somebody else play it, right? And so it's being aware of that aspect of how do we best learn in construction? Well, what are we typically doing on a daily basis? Why have we created a career in this, right? It's to be active. It's to do something. It's that hands-on approach. So creating an 8-hour training that's just in a classroom setting, that inherently is going to reduce some of that learning transfer to those who are typically active in most of their days, right? And Todd, and probably, you know me, I'll start veering off on the question. So if you need to bring me back, let me know if I'm not answering the question, because I'll just continue to go off on that. But there are frequent barriers, though, to what we create for ourselves. And I shouldn't say barriers, I should say more of hurdles to construction training specifically. And I like to say hurdles because they seem like they're a little easier to overcome. And I experienced all of this, right, when I was that trainer. But one is just improper planning and implementation, right? Not inspecting the when, how, or why of training. The next is like the speaker, the presenter, the trainer, the facilitator, whatever you want to call it. But if it's somebody who's not resonating with the audience or who wasn't fully vetted on their expertise, right, that goes back to, we don't always learn everything just completely new. We're trying to attach it to something. So if you can make it so that they can resonate with them or understand them, right, that's going to help. Mm-hmm. 3 is the audience. And this is the big one for construction, right? Not considering the audience and just presenting or barreling ahead without considering who we're training, what their days and struggles look like. What do they need, right? Versus what do I want to present to them? Constantly using a one-size-fits-all approach. So either using a traditional method for everyone, no matter their learning preference, right? We just talked and mentioned on that. Or it could be making everyone go through the training, even though only a few truly need it, right? That can dull our future training. The 5th is overloaded. I'm very guilty in this a lot. We cram too much information or content into one training or setting, or if it's too long of a training. Just like our food, right? For information, we can only consume so much before we have to process and absorb it in order to effectively learn. So if you're just cramming so much, then you got way too much food left over in the buffet afterwards, and you're just throwing it away, right? And then that 6th one is ourselves, honestly, not being intentional about our own mindset or training, not having the right tools for the job or investing in our own development. Or honestly not allocating enough time or energy to plan, build, and implement it, right? Mm-hmm. Those are the 6 barriers I've identified just through my own trainings, and then over my now 10 years of experience of training in construction, of some of those hurdles that we frequently have or bring with us to the trainings, and then causes those hurdles to transfer to our audience for them to be able to learn it.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Just a kind of a reminder to our listening audience. If I see more people joining in, which is awesome, welcome. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat, and I will make sure to bring them up and ask Amy as we go along. So, Amy, thanks for laying out those 6 kind of key areas. Yeah. Are there some kind of innovative approaches that can be taken to help elevate the quality of training programs and ensure that, people are really engaged, they're effective, they're memorable, and they're keeping those 6 areas in mind as they're going through it?
Yeah, well, one is just, again, kind of be aware of that, but it's even in just preparing, right? Some innovative opportunities in our preparations and building of the training. It's how we introduce the content and how we start the trainings. Legitimately, this sounds a little crazy, but even just that, before that we dive into the content, before, we're 10 minutes in, within the first 10 minutes, and even before, is what are we doing to motivate them to want the information? So, here's the thing. They have to want the training. We can mandate that they're there. I mean, everybody on this webcast, right? You can be here. We could have mandated that you're here, but we can't force information into your brain, right? Which is a good thing. That's good. But we can't. And there was a statement in one of my readings back in my master's course that, right, and everybody knows this statement, right? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Mm-hmm. But our opportunity lies in salting the horse, right? Which inherently makes them more thirsty, increasing the likelihood of them drinking when you lead them to water. This step or process is frequently missed by us as trainers, or we don't feel it's our responsibility, right? It's not my responsibility to motivate you to want the information, right? Mm-hmm. We place it entirely on the audience's shoulders. But this is one of the massive hurdles right there. Is just What can you do as a trainer, a speaker, a facilitator, trainer, educator, to help them connect to why they would want the information? And so that is a massive component right there of just, again, what do they typically already know? What do they do? What do they need? What do they need to know to solve daily struggles or problems? That right there can really help just say, this is going to help you, hopefully, right? But it's still up to them to be able to absorb it and use it and how they use it going forward.
Well, let's double click on that for a second, because I think that's a really interesting point of whose responsibility is it to get ready and open mind to come into a training. You just kind of gave the argument for the trainer responsibility. Are there other people that have a stake in this? And if so, what is their stake? How should they handle this?
Oh yeah, it's almost, I think it's a shared responsibility. That's the thing. I think that sometimes we're like, well, 90-10, right? 90% of it's your responsibility to come motivated and want to learn the information, and mine's the 10%. But what if we switch that to like a 60-40 or 50-50, right? Of like, you know what, I'm going to do everything I can to make it so that it's motivated, so that you can connect to it, to build it so that it's a lot more accessible to you and your lifestyle and your work style and how you work and your stress levels and energy levels and everything else, and the content. But there's absolutely still, right? Again, I can't force information into people's brains. They still have to want to come and get the water. They still have to want to come and get the information. So it's a shared responsibility there. I can't motivate you to put your pants on and get to the training in the morning. That is not my responsibility. You've got to have some self-motivation in that, right? But what I can do from that side, instead of just compiling and here's a combination of information and, there you go. Well, okay, now you're probably not lifting your part of the board as well, right? As not on that team or holding your weight as a trainer as well. So it's a shared responsibility for sure.
Yeah. I figured you might say that. What's the company's role in it as well too? So you have the trainer, you have the individual, but then there's the third component of the actual company that's probably paying for the training and saying you should go here, and helping encourage, maybe mandating that they go to the training. What's their responsibility and role in this?
Very good point. Now that completely depends, right? They should, I guess the best way to say it is they should be encouraging either way. Mm-hmm. Should they pay for all of their education? No, right? If you want to go learn about astronomy, right? How does that apply to the team? How can it benefit the team? If you can explain to how it benefits the team, then maybe they would reimburse it or pay for it. But some of it, especially if it's the skills or if there's specific company processes, procedures, or if it falls within your expertise, then it really should be you that's training that, right? Finding your own in-house experts, subject matter experts, and allowing them to share that process of how, why, and the reasons and the processes of how to do that, right? But if there's some other areas where people still want to see improvement or have development, and the company doesn't have the time, capacity, or necessarily the expertise to do that, right, to be able to provide that, then that's when you can absolutely hire out a consultant. Todd, are you still there? Hopefully everybody's still able to hear me here.
We can still hear you.
Okay, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, just keep on going.
Keep going. So the responsibility for that company is, can you encourage it? Can you say, if there is a specific development area that somebody sees that is applied to their role, or being that optimal team player, or being productive and just the best version of themselves, can you submit that then to the company to say, hey, here's a proposal, right? I proposed this one. Can I pay for it myself and get reimbursed? Or can we bring somebody in for this because I see how it benefits the team? Then that company should be encouraging in that aspect. I think sometimes we do lean heavily on our companies to provide that for us, though, or expect to know what we want or why we want it. That's not always necessarily the case either. So you got to understand yourself to be able to communicate that and advocate for that as well in those trainings. So
how important is it to corporate technology and elevating training? And can you give an example of technology that has made a significant difference?
This one has been actually, it's so challenging in construction. We're so instinctual, especially out in the field. We're very instinctual beings, right? There's so much more communication going on than just words. There's the inherent, that nonverbal communication. That's what a lot of them prefer. But there's so much value to technology. My entire program is actually online. And it's been interesting because there is some hesitancy and some pushback on this because, well, it's online, right? It sounds kind of lazy of me to do it that way. But it actually takes a substantial amount of work and intention on this. But the whole point of this was to get it out to the people who needed it most. So my entire business is built around, right, developing those hardest to train skills and get it out to the hardest to reach people in our industry, right? Those essential soft communication leadership skills that are not as tangible, and get it out to people who can never make it into the office because they've got to be on the job site because of the supervision and be there for their teams and be there as the leader, right? And setting the tone for the team and the project. And so getting it out to them, but making it in a way that it's accessible to them and it's not creating more time. I will say there's a lot of us in construction. We aren't probably the people who love to be the newest phone owner and spend 4 or 8 hours picking new ringtones and backgrounds and everything. We just want a phone that works because this is what we're focused on over here. So if you can make it very simple, which technology has been amazing and fantastic for that, right? But incorporate that, make it into micro learning, make it into micro chunks, and use that as the opportunity to get this out to the people who have wanted and needed it most. They're looking at YouTubes, they're looking at Instagram, they're looking at these to try to find these trainings. So can you, as an employer, provide that if it's needed, right, within your company, those processes, those behaviors, the different culture, right, that you're trying to teach. But also, gosh, there's 3D, there's some amazing fun training stuff out there. I think there's even a mechanical, it's not even 3D. What is it? It's virtual reality, but you can actually train and use your hands to be able to effectively and properly train on how to install these processes. So there's amazing opportunities out there. It's just, again, trying to get creative with it, but keeping your audience in mind as to who's using it. And is it fun for you or is it fun for them?
Very, very good point. All right. So what role does feedback play in elevating training programs, and how can we effectively incorporate both instructor and learner feedback to improve courses?
I think feedback's a massive component. Actually, you know, what's interesting, and I see this is when I start to go down the rabbit hole a little bit, because training is actually a fantastic feedback mechanism, right? I mean, you can use it as a reward for good behavior by providing advancement and development opportunities, right? And wanting to invest in the individuals. Or you can use it as a discipline for bad behavior or poor performance. I guess an important aspect here is, are you only using it for discipline? And if you are, how are they supposed to be motivated to continue to show up to your training, right? Are you using the training how are you using that within your organization and teams? But training should be fluid, right? It's not a matter of fact. Things do change, and that's okay. That's a good thing. Even my trainings, I'm always incorporating stuff because I'm always developing. I'm always reading new things, listening to different podcasts, right? To just gauge, is this still the best tool? Am I maintaining and calibrating my tool? You need to maintain and calibrate the training every so often too. Sometimes it's removing a micro learning or video altogether and then adding something new. Stop incorporating those 70s safety videos, right? Like, use a new one. We need to update that. So feedback from that aspect. It is challenging though too, because I think everybody becomes a professional trainer too, as some of the audience members, and they don't understand all of the different components that have to be considered. And so some of them have to be compromised in order to create a training. So just making sure that you're understanding that. But the feedback of, I'm not learning this, I'm not getting this, or if you have people starting to fall asleep in your trainings, right? That's feedback right there. Do something, get them up, get them moving, throw out some candy, right? Doing something to just get them involved in that. But also maybe, do I need to incorporate more activities, more discussions in my trainings, right? From that aspect and that feedback. So it should always be changing and adjusting. Maybe not completely overhauling. That's way too much time, but it should always be tweaking at least a little bit and morphing and growing and evolving along with you and your company.
Agreed. And Todd, we are just about to talk about common barriers, and I'm going to turn it right back over to you.
Awesome. Thanks for jumping right in there, Missy. It's the fun of live
You got it.
podcasting. I'm hardwired in and it crashed, but I'm on my hotspot. So there's a will, there's a way. So
Right? We are all human
be
anyway,
patient.
right?
Yeah. At first I thought it was on you, Amy. I was like, Amy's froze. I'm still moving. This is. Then I realized it was me. Nobody could hear me.
I did pause there for a minute and was like, just checking, but yeah, jump right back in. Welcome back.
Perfect. Thank you. Good to be back. So I heard you guys talking about the kind of feedback loops and everything like that. I know one of the things that you said at the beginning was around the implementation phase of the training really being crucial, but often kind of failing to support that learning transfer. Are there certain aspects that people should be mindful of that when it comes to implementation, and maybe combining that with the feedback loop as well too? But what should they be thinking about?
Absolutely. So implementation, and what I mean by this, right, is the when, the how, and the why the training is implemented, right? Really kind of thinking about it or breaking it down that way. Are you allocating enough time to properly plan it to increase that potential for learning transfer, right? I mentioned that. And when I'm talking about when, is determining the best time of the training is within a time unit, right? The time unit could be an entire career. When do they need this? Are they ready for this information? Are they past the point of needing this information? And are they the ones asleep in the back, right? Or the time unit could be much shorter, like the time of day or week. Poor learning transfer could simply be because we picked a low energy time of day or week for the participants. For example, inherently as humans, we get decision fatigue. Did you know that? Have you heard of, I don't remember if I mentioned that one on our last podcast.
I for sure get it sometimes. So I get it.
Well, inherently, the way that our brains operate and just like the energy we expend throughout a day, we get it towards the end of the day and towards the end of the week. Right, which does not bode well for learning complex concepts. Typically at work, we're using a very demanding part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is a very energy expensive part of our brain, which is why at the end of a mentally demanding day or week, you don't care what you have for dinner as long as it involves something edible, right? And a couch to lounge on. Like we're tired, we're exhausted. So if we're scheduling these trainings for these low energy times out of convenience, and sometimes it's out of necessity, sometimes we have to, but just consider this. How apt are they going to be to want to focus on learning new content? It depends on the content, right? And your audience. It may help to bring what I mentioned, right? Snacks, candy, energy drinks, something, but it should be considered either way. So that's the when, but then also the implementation of the how and why. Are you implementing the training in the first place? Again, we just mentioned it could be a fantastic feedback mechanism. Is it discipline or is it a reward, right? And so to overcome this barrier or hurdle, right? Plan. Spend some time to identify the why for yourself, and then communicate or clarify this to participants. This helps to identify. When you identify the why, it helps to identify the who, where, how, and what. Okay. Prioritize who needs to be there and who doesn't, and reframe and develop the training as a reward just as much as, if not more than, like discipline, right? But then also identify the expertise, right? Is this best in-house, like we just mentioned, or is it best outsourced? In construction, we subcontract out stuff. As a GC, I'm not going to go and learn the electrical, right, of how to do that and do that on a project. That's going to be very energy expensive versus hiring out an expert to do that part, right? What do you know? What are you an expert of? And make sure that you're complementing that. They should be complementing each other, but that's really the implementation. That's what I'm talking about, and really spending the time considering this. And it's typically a forgotten part of training. Somebody just tells us to do something or this is needed. So then we just go look at books and build PowerPoints, and then here's our training, right?
Yeah.
Why?
I'd love for you to talk to that person that's like, yeah, this is great. I'm on board with it, but I barely have time to pre-plan my actual project. How am I going to build in the bandwidth to pre-plan and think through my training programming curriculum? How do you address that?
Yeah. If it's an entire curriculum, then you should have that time allocated. You better put that into your schedule, right? That's like the design phase of our projects, right? If we're not allocating enough design phase, then construction, it's going to come back in cost or time or quality in the construction phase. But
Right.
if it's just for one training, right? It's not that much. It's really not. It's not easy. It does take practice. It's probably going to take longer the first few times versus when you really start getting into it, it becomes a lot easier. It's more of that habit to be able to just close your door. I had to do this with submittals for steel submittals. It would take 4 hours. I'd close my door and just say, I'm doing steel submittals, right? Nobody would disturb you because they get it. They understand, right? But making sure that you are blocking that out because nobody's going to give that to you except for yourself. If it's 15 minutes or if it's just 1 hour, just do I fully understand why this training is needed? What are we really trying to get down to? What are we really trying to fix? Fix or prevent, right? But making sure you understand that why yourself. Otherwise, it's going to be scattered and kind of thrown together at the end, and then it's not going to be effective. The return on investment's just, it's not going to be there.
Mm-hmm. So where my brain jumped to that was coming back to the you hurdle, not you, Amy, but the individual hurdle of
Yes.
getting in our own way. How do we kind of reorient our brain to get out of our way and to just make it a smoother, more seamless process where we are engaged and we're being proactive and not being the hurdle?
Yes. Again, definitely creating your mindset, setting that time to design your mindset for it. That's a massive component in it that, if we don't believe in the message, even if we're the instructional designer, right, or we've got a whole team developing it and then we're not the actual speaker, still, if we don't believe in it, it's going to come through in the end. People are going to pick up on that. But really, I think the biggest way we get into our own way is perfection. Trying to get everything perfect before releasing it, and then it winds up never getting released. Or I've legitimately locked up so many times at the beginning of some of my trainings because I had an entire script and I was terrified of missing the perfect word that I curated or the way that I stated it on paper, and it made for some horrible trainings. And I'm sorry, everybody who had to deal with that. I still use scripts, but I'm a lot more comfortable veering off of them and just accepting that as humans, we aren't perfect. And that's wonderful and incredible that we aren't. Mm-hmm. Right? Different people learn different from different methods and from different trainers. There are going to be people who resonate with you because of your experience, because of the way that you're able to articulate or communicate or use a language that resonates with them, right? But you're inherently a part of the training. So don't try to engineer yourself out of it. Mm-hmm. Make sure that those fantastic pieces of who you are and how you do it are included. This is what makes it innovative, right? Is that aspect is a collection of all of these things. And that's what a training would be. That's what a construction project team is. That's what a building is, of like all these different materials, right? So see it as that aspect of, don't get so caught up on perfection, but we do get in our own ways, also thinking that we're the best for everything. The egos sometimes, or the self-doubt sometimes.
There's no ego in construction.
Oh man. Yeah. But it's really just self-awareness is a massive component, which is a part of emotional intelligence, right? Knowing when you're the problem or when you're the glitter, right? I guess, or whatever the innovation, whatever it is you want to call it, right? Of just knowing those different areas, and contributing and not holding back, but then, it's balance. It's all about balance, but very frequently we get in our own way in more ways than it needs to be.
Yeah. More ways than we probably even know as well, too.
Yes.
So having that kind of self-awareness is huge, hard, but huge.
Yes.
So you brought up the emotional intelligence. I know we're getting close to the end of time, so we'll start to land the plane here, but, I love the topic of emotional intelligence, so I can't let that go by without hitting on it a little bit. And people want to listen more to this. We spent a lot of time in our first conversation diving into emotional intelligence, but why is it considered or maybe why is it not considered a key element in effective training programs?
It absolutely should be considered because it's there, right? It impacts the learning environment in almost every way possible. Learning and training is a transaction of information, right? It's communication. That requires self-awareness, self-control, social awareness. Those are the three of the four EQ pillars, right? That are imperative to effectively communicating and transferring this information. How are you showing up? How are they showing up? Right? That's a critical component, and it's going to be there. It's just what's your intelligence about it. And interesting, in my neuroscience for business course I took with MIT, they shared that like 95% of people believe they're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% really are. So this means that 95% of people are showing up in teams, in trainings, in organizations completely unaware on if they're the problem or not, right? Like, that's a problem, or where we're fallible, right? When I was a project manager, it became the trainer, right? I had some participants who had to continue to go through my program and my trainings again and again, which would mean that there's a failure somewhere, right? They shouldn't have to go through it more than once if it's effective. And I could have blamed them, be like, well, you guys suck at learning. Like, God, why, come prepared next time, come with a notepad, whatever. But I looked to myself. I was the problem. I had many of those hurdles that I mentioned before, and I came with me to the trainings, which impacted the participants from learning. So you have to be able to identify when or where you're the problem, or when your strengths are actually just coming on too strong and you need to pare back a little bit to allow somebody else's strengths to shine through and something. So it's like you mentioned, Todd, it's not easy or fun. It's really not. We love to know about our strengths and compliment ourselves, and we should, right? You don't want to not, again, it's a healthy balance, but where are we contributing? How are we influencing the training? How are we influencing our teams? Poor behaviors, poor results, positive results, whatever. Really being critical with that and sitting with yourself and trying to determine and know that about yourself. You better know yourself better than everybody else does, which that's hard. It's not a fun process, but it is critical, especially for training and creating training and presenting and facilitating, coaching, any of that, right? Yeah.
So if, the vast majority of people think that they're self-aware, but in reality are not self-aware, what are some tricks to realizing that, hey, you're not as self-aware as what you think you are? How do you kind of get that gut check of, oh, I am the problem right now, I need to fix it?
That self-awareness. That's the only way. Actually, so it's like a double-edged sword. Gosh, honestly, just continual investment. There are a lot of those tools. Talk with a friend, talk with a colleague who works with you, right? And really be curious and entering that conversation and ask some of those hard conversations. Take some personality tests or some self-assessments. I've taken, I think, all of them, because of different companies implement different ones. They're like, hey, do this one, do this one. I really like Gallup Strengths Finders. It has the 5 strengths, but it also has those bottom 5 that they say, don't live here. These are energy expensive for you. Shine up here. You're not contributing these to your team if you're not living up here. But being honest and patient with yourself in this process, it's ongoing. It's ongoing, right? Read books, listen to podcasts, take a class. It takes continual effort, but again, it's critical and important to do so. And those prefrontal cortex exercises and workouts, right? It holds our critical thinking, our impulse control, our problem solving, and everything else. And really developing that part of your brain and helping with that. Mindfulness, meditation, exercising to get some oxygen to your head brain. I've actually even heard ice baths and showers help with emotional regulation and stuff, but look that one up first.
But I don't want to try it. Yeah.
I started doing some of the ice. I can't do the ice bath, but I'm working on it. But it's right. It starts that whole process of but it practices your breathing and control and self-control and everything else. And I've heard some amazing things about it, but find what works for you. You've got to really dig down to and face yourself. instead of avoiding those things that have been buried down there for a while. But embrace them because it makes you who you are. It's not easy, but there's so many resources out there now of just like self-awareness and how to work on that and help with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important too, to come to the understanding that it's a cliche moment here, but it's not a destination. It's not, oh, I've arrived at self-awareness. It's a constant journey. You can be self-aware on one thing and be totally oblivious on another thing that's related even, and to have those people in your life that will call you out. My best friend is great at that in a very loving way, but it will say something about me. I'm like, that's not how I just reacted at that situation. He's like, yes, it is. I'm like, oh,
I didn't say that.
That's not how I did it in my head. I was much more tactful in my head. So it's important to have those people.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. And it is. There's no flip-flops and sandy beaches because there's no end to it. There isn't. And that's the same with leadership and communication skills because they are more habits. I guess self-awareness is probably more of a habit, right, than a skill. It's one of those, you got to continue to maintain it and change it when you need to change it, but takes work. It's like the optimal weight, right? Yeah. It takes work to maintain that, apparently.
There you go. So I like that. It's a good analogy.
Use it that way.
Yeah, for sure. So as we are coming to our closing minutes, a couple of rapid fire questions for you. First, what does modeling the future, what does that mean and look like to you?
What is modeling the future of training, of construction?
However you want to, whatever future you see.
Yeah, modeling the future is embracing who we are and then contributing and connecting with other humans, right, to be able to create those amazing things. Yes, there's absolutely some innovative tools, some amazing technology. Use those as tools, though, and remember that you are the best version and the most innovative thing. We are the definition of innovative, right, because every one of us is unique and always changing and morphing. So modeling the future is just... I don't know. I was going to say something. Just don't be a butthead, really. Be you. Model who you want to see. Model what you want the world to be. Model what you want construction to be. Do that. And I think that's the biggest component of modeling.
Nice. And it's a great segue for the other one. What does innovation mean to you?
Innovation it's a combination of so many different things, but I would say a human is innovative. Again, add your spark, add you, because you are so unique and different than everybody else, and embracing those differences, but combining them and attaching them to other individuals. That's what's going to create anything of innovative, but that's us, right? That defines human is just always new, always changing, always different. And it's amazing. It's fantastic. So.
Yeah, nice. How do people find out more information and connect with you?
Oh, gosh. LinkedIn is the only social platform I use. It's the only one I have time to manage. Only one, right, at this time.
A great one.
But otherwise, livingwellworks.org is my website. Feel free to go and visit it. But those two are probably the best way to find me. I've got like the longest email possible for being like a trainer in communication. I really should make it as simple as possible, but maybe it'll help people with their listening skills to have a long email. I don't know, but so just look me up on LinkedIn, connect with me there, because I'm not gonna, I won't make you endure my email address and the length of that. So.
Sounds good. Well, final question for you. If I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing. What would you pick to innovate?
The enjoyment of the humans in it, and help them realize what they impact, and that there should be a lot more enjoyment in it. I think people make stuff heavy over time, but it's an amazing industry. So just increase the enjoyment, or allow people to see how amazing of an industry it is, to uplift their spirits a little bit. And I think sometimes it gets heavy, it gets stressful, it's a lot of pressure. So that's the one thing I would fix, is just their mental mindset, right, about construction.
Yeah, that'd be huge. That'd be huge for sure.